Kathy from Stitch It Together, and today I am going to be showing how to use fabric compensation. But in order to do that, I'm also going to be demonstrating very quickly how to set up borders and corners. Because for the most part, you would definitely want to use fabric compensation when you are doing your borders and corners. So let me just show you how to do that. I'm going to share my screen. Go. And let's get started here. You're going to open when you first get into QCT. Let's move this a little bit into the borders and corners. And when you open up, you're going to see that it looks a lot different than a pantograph screen. So if I had already set my safe area, it will ask you to set your safe area first. So what I have right here is supposed to represent a border. So you have the interior of your quilt is right here. This should be like the outside edge if it's a standard border and corner. This is the outside or the raw edge of your quilt. And then this area inside here in the pink area represents the seam. And then if you'll notice that this section right here is the same, and that's what these functions or these buttons are supposed to represent. Here is the outside edge right here, and here's the interior of the border. And what we need to do to set up the borders and corners is show QCT where they are. And how I usually start is I will usually, and this is the green arrow represents your the needle on your machine. You're going to need to bring your machine needle right to the corner. So I'm going to bring my machine needle right to that corner. And then with my finger, I would touch that button. Then I would bring my machine needle and I would use my needle jog function if you have one to bring that needle as close to the fabric as you can so you can be right spot on. And then you're going to touch this button here. Then you're going to bring your machine down just a little bit. You don't have to bring it down all the way, just down at least some. Touch this button and I'm going to go over here and touch this one. Then you're going to repeat it for the other side. I would bring the needle to the top of the corner, to the interior, and then it would not matter which outside edge you did first. I usually just do this one, and it doesn't really matter how far down you go. Oops. Okay, I did the wrong one. Right here. Here we go. Right here. And then outside corner. Got distracted by the phone. There we go. All right. And as you see, it did move them just a little bit. And that is probably the case with our borders, is that they probably are not perfectly straight. And that would be a real case scenario. It probably really does kind of look like this off just a little bit. And in fact, you'll probably have little bits that are off and not perfectly straight right here. That could be due to rolling your differences on your frame rail, excuse me, or just in that the quilt is perfectly imperfect. And so just so you know that that is what this fabric compensation is all about. We are going to compensate for those little differences. And like right now, it looks very straight, but these lines aren't. And in your real quilt, they're probably not perfectly straight either. So this is where you go to decide what kind of a border you're going to have. A standard border and corner could either have a block, that's where you have one block in the corner and then the rest is filled in, or you can have a border that has a corner. That is in vogue right now, and I think that is pretty much standard. You can find both of these inside of QCT. You can also have no border. Now, when you have no border, if you're just trying to fill in, maybe it's even a sashing, maybe it's not even a border, it is still going to have these buttons right here, but you don't have to set them, just so you know. So let's go back to having a corner. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set margins. You're definitely going to want to set margins if you need them. And so if you don't want your margins to be the same, you're going to unlock right here so that you can have separate margins. For me, I like to have about a ½ inch on the outer and maybe a 1/16 to an 1/8 on the inside. And that's generally my go-to. But there are a lot of reasons you might have yours different. So do what works best for you. But that's how you would set the margin. Then you're going to get your pattern. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to select the corner first. I'm going to go to gold patterns, border set. I'm just going to pick a real easy one. And this one is asking me to select the corner first. So I'm going to select the corner, but it doesn't really matter which one you do first. I'm going to select the corner. I'm going to make sure that I select join if I want them to be joined. And I do. So I'm going to go ahead and select inside the border right there, the inside as well. I'm going to say open. And right now it's not on autofill. I want you to notice that. So it only did one pattern, and I can change that. Watch what happens when I select autofill. Now it fills it in beautifully for me. I really like autofill. But if you had a need to add more or less, you can change that with this section right here, how many border patterns you have. Once you're ready to go, if you needed to flip a pattern, let me just go through that really quickly. There are options to do that. If you needed to edit some patterns, that's a whole lesson on its own. But those things are there just so that you're aware. So once that happens, I would be ready to sew, technically speaking. I'm going to say sew all of this. I wouldn't want to sew a portion unless for some reason I needed to do a portion. So I'm going to say select all. Now you're going to go to the quilting interface window, and that is where you're going to find fabric compensation. You would want to, of course, do your settings or optimize if you needed. I didn't save in the last, in the design uh, screen previously, but I could have saved if I wanted to. But if you need to optimize anything or change anything, you would then want to save it again so that you have all your updated information saved. I am not going to do that in the Zoom. But now you're going to go to plugins because that's where fabric compensation is. So I'm going to select fabric compensation right here, and a new window opens up right down here on the bottom. And so I want to show you a few things. You have your lines. This represents again what we've already set, and they're set in straight lines from point to point, and there would be diagonally, slightly diagonal because of how I set them up. But we might have some dips in the rest of this. It's not a straight line. Our seam may be just a little wavy. And this is how we can compensate for that. It's almost as if we were setting up a new zone or a new boundary. Boundary is a better word. A new boundary for QCTs to stay within, one that is more complicated and more complex. And so this is how we're going to do that. The dark line right here is the active line. Let me scroll through it. How you control which active line you're working with is this button right here, next. So notice now this one is dark. Now I'm going to go to next. Now this one is dark. So when it's dark, it's the active line. And you will scroll through each one of them individually. You might not have to do them all, but this is how you get from one to the next. So I'm back here at the top. And now what I would want to do is the plus button adds points. So this works an awful lot like the marking tool if you have used that before. So this adds points. This takes away your last point. This would remove a whole line, and this would allow you to start completely over and erase all of your lines. So generally, you're going to add your points with the plus button right here. So how many points you put is completely dependent on you. So I'm going to like go down. I think that these are 1 inches, 1 inch marks, the grid. So I'm gonna, let's just say they're roughly 5 inches. I would probably in a real quilt do more points rather than less. But let's just say that we have a point that comes down a little bit. And you see how it adjusts your pattern accordingly. Then maybe when we get back up to here, it's right back up to where it should be. But maybe we have another dip down here again. Maybe it dips just a little bit right here. And then it comes back up right up here. I would do a lot of points if this was a real one. This is just for demonstration purposes. So this is how fabric compensation works. So you're essentially setting a whole new boundary with every little dot that you set here. You're changing the boundary, and it's still keeping your margin, just so you know. But it's going to allow you to have differences in where your seam line is. You're setting the new boundary for it to follow. So when you're done with your top one, you're going to hit next. It's going to go to the next line, and you would follow that down. And you really only need to go down as far as where that pattern is. You click the next line. And again, I would probably not start too far off from where the pattern is. Oops, I can go previous. There we go. I didn't add my point. There we go. Again, you're going to want to use your needle jog function. You're going to want to be as close to your fabric with that needle as you possibly can. So you're not looking at your foot. Your foot doesn't count. Foot is too big. It's not precise enough. You want to be bringing your needle to where you want the new boundary to be, usually your seam line or the outside edge. So again, let me just make some adjustments here. And as you see, it is just adjusting as I go. Add next line, next line. There, now I'm done. When you're done, when you're okay with that, you can make some choices here too. Right now, I have it set on lines where you can see that it is bringing them down in lines, but you can change this to arcs and it will smooth it out just a bit. And maybe it's still staying as lines, but it seems to be like it's going to be arcs now rather than just the straight lines. Yes, I can see that it's moved arcs just a little bit. But so you can change from one to the other based on what is going on in your quilt. Say, okay. So when you say okay, you come back to the quilting interface screen and you would want to pull your bobbin and then you would go ahead and sew. And as you see, all those changes that you made to your boundary are going to sew. When you're finished, say back to fabric placement, and you're right back here at the borders and corners screen right here. So if you haven't saved, you probably should have, and I didn't. I would recommend that you do save. You will need to then decide how you're going to proceed with your quilt. Some people have tried to put their borders as they go, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's called chunking. I mean, there are probably some, I don't like to do that. I actually do the method as QCT instructs you to do, where I will, to do the side borders, I do the bottom border, and then I take the quilt off the machine and I turn it, put it back on the frame, turned, and then I do the left and the right, which are now the top and the bottom borders. What I would do if this was my quilt, now I'm going to do the pantograph or whatever I'm going to do on the inside. Maybe it's not a pantograph, maybe it is block or more custom. But I would then do the inside and I would do, this is what I would do, the whole quilt. And then I would come back to my saved pattern. Let me show you how you save it. Save, and I'll just say test, save. All right. So when I came, let's go out of, we'll go back to home. So we've done our pantograph and now we want to do the bottom border. So I come back to borders and corners. I'll select it. But this time I just want to load what I already have. So there is the icon right here for save, but then you have select your border. It will open up to the proper folder that it can only be in. And then you would want to select this. It will fill back in. But that's the top border and I want the bottom border. But that's okay because right here I can switch it. That says top. Now I'm going to switch it to bottom. And you see it completely fills in the bottom again for me. But in simulation mode, it doesn't show this. But in real life, it is then going to show you a message right here saying that you need to place your border and corner again. Even if you had started and then and done your top and then rolled it down to the bottom and did it immediately, which I don't recommend, but you could do that. It would still give you an error message that when you switch to the bottom border, that you need to place that pattern again. So this time you see that our box right here looks like our bottom border. And you would need to place these all over again. And now I would start with the outside corner and go in, but at the bottom. Again, use your needle jog function so that you're as close as you can get. Then I'd want to do the other corner. This is not an all-inclusive tutorial, by the way. This is just so you can see, since I'm already doing this, there's no sense in not showing you some of it. So now that that is placed, I could go ahead and sew the whole thing. Now, it should have remembered let's go back just to be sure. It should have remembered what my margins were. And now look at that, it did not. So it really does pay to remember what your margins were. And so I had set them so that they would be different. Half inch on the outer margin is fine, but that was not what I had for the inner margin. I had like a 16th. So it does pay to make sure that your margin is correct so that they're consistent. So once you do that, you would then sew all. And here we are again. So you would definitely want to use your fabric compensation again. And here it is. And you would just do the same thing that you did before. The dark green line is your active line, and you change it with this button right here with next. And you just make sure, because it's reverse directions, that you are actually placing your points on the active line, because sometimes it's easy to think you're placing one thing. Your pattern will get all skewed up, so you'll know. But sometimes that happens. And when you're done, you would then select OK. I just want to see something. I had never really paid attention. I wonder what it looks like if I set the points with arc. So let me see if it looks a little bit different when I do that. Learn something new all the time. Want it to be, yeah, you see, I think that in order to get the arc, so I guess when you're placing your line, you need to decide if you're going to do lines or arcs, because it is going to be, you can't change it after the fact. I did not know that. Oopsie, I don't know what that just did, but let's just remove all that. So it comes back, there we go. So make sure it's in arcs. We'll start over. Yeah, I think that's what it's doing. I'm just kind of going back and forth. Not really sure that I like the arcs here, because it seems like when I use the arcs that it's not staying consistent where I want it to be. Let's look, let's say OK. I'm not really sure that I like the arcs. So I can always go, just FYI, I'm learning something new all the time. I would just go back to placement, and then sew all. That would remove everything. And go to plugins again, fabric compensation, and I would want to put it on the lines. I think I like the lines better. Mm. Yeah, see, it seems like that works a little bit better. I'm honest, if you have a real bumpy border. Anyway, you see, you get what I'm doing here. When you get to your end, you would say next, and then you would place each individual line until you get the end, and you would say OK. You would sew this. And now this is where, when I would be done, I'm going to then close on out of this. And here's an important thing to remember. I'm going to close that as QCT, and I would recommend that you do the same thing because what you should do now is take your quilt off the frame. But when you put it back on the frame, you need to remember, and this is why it's so important to close completely out of QCT. And I guess I'll just go ahead and do that because you will need to set your safe area again. And I think that is something that is very easy to forget. Because remember, when you turn that quilt, it's not going to be the same size anymore. Your safe area may be in a different position, bigger, smaller, you don't know. But you need to set that safe area all over again. So close all the way out of QCT so that it will prompt you to set your safe area again. And now you would go into your borders and corners right here. And again, it's going to start by default on the top. But now what you would want to do is I can go ahead and get that one that I've already saved. Say open. And again, I want to check those margins. And I see that it didn't do what I wanted to do. So I would need to change it. Okay, there we go. And now what I'm going to do when I say get patterns, I'm just going to remove the corner. And you see it removed those corner pieces. But then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to need to set the margin because this space right here might not be perfect every single time. And again, this is not an all-inclusive tutorial, but I'm just going to show you quickly how to do that. You would say set margins, you'd go back to two set margins. And now you have this area here that says custom border. So what you're going to do is you're going to bring your needle and you're going to bring it to where that corner, because remember this part is sewn, and this is not, this is what's going to get sewn. This area should already be sewn. So you will bring your needle to where that margin is. And let's just say, for the sake of demonstration, that my pattern ends right here. So I'm going to bring my needle right to the farthest point where that margin is supposed to be, and then I'm going to hit left edge. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the right edge. Do you see that it moved it? So that's where it was, and it moved it. So let's just say it's supposed to sew to here. And I'm going to go ahead and say right edge right there. So it's moved it. And then another thing that you can do is you can use your marking tool. So you can open up your marking tool. That's what I just did. I went to plugins, I opened up the marking tool, and then I could add points wherever I wanted to wherever it's supposed to be and make sure that that line falls onto it. So that's just a suggestion. And then when you're done, you would say, okay, now we're back into the borders and quarters screen, and I can say, sew all. You must face, okay, it says I undid that. I guess I didn't place my border when I did this. See, this is why it's a good thing to do. You still need to place your border, and I forgot to do that. So when you have none right here, I can say none. I only need to place these two, or these 4 points. I only need to place this one and this one, and then this one and this one. All right, and I'm going to say sew all. There we go. You see, it is still, those lines are still there, but it's only going to sew this portion right here. The lines are not going to sew, but that just shows you where your borders and where it's going to be in relation to the rest of your quilt. When you are done, you would just, because now this is the top of your quilt, you would do the same thing. You would, after it sews, let's just let it sew. All right, finish back to pattern placement. You could just go bottom. And it says you're going to need to replace your border, which I forgot to do before, but I'm going to do that now. I'm going to go ahead and bring my needle to the bottom edge, except I don't really need it to be the bottom edge because I'm not going to be sewing to there. But what I do need to do is show it where it was supposed to be. So even though this area is sewn, this is how it figures out where it's at. So I will place this. And again, I only need to do these points right here. Here we go. And again, this is where you might need to change something. Maybe it's off just a little bit right here. Let's just use our marking tool. Let's say that right here to right here is where I need it to be. And I can see that that isn't where it is, so easily solved. Once I know where it needs to be, I can just move there is the margin. Here's the right edge right here. I could just move the margin to where it does need to be. I could do the same thing. I could use the marking tool over here to make sure the placement is correct as well. And there's the left edge and it's stretched it on out and so on. Again, this is not all inclusive. It's a little bit longer even than I thought it was going to be. But it was mostly to show you how to use fabric compensation. And again, you would still want to use your fabric compensation for the top and for the bottom. And this time you don't need to do all the sides. You really only need the bottom, and then you can scroll through and do the top. You don't have to do all of them every single time. You only need to do fabric compensation for where you need it to be. So I hope that this is a good tutorial. This was especially for Tammy, but I'm putting it on YouTube for anyone else who might want it. I hope that you found this helpful. So again, I'm Kathy with Stitch It Together, and my phone number is 540-840-2884. If you need some help, give me a call and we can set up some lessons.